Who did? Tim? Oh, Paul.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Monday, September 16th, 2019 City Council regular meeting to order. We have a pretty good crowd tonight. Anybody that is interested in joining the council and myself for the Pledge of Allegiance, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Deputy Council President Bldgs is excused this evening. Under special business, I have several proclamations to do this evening, so I'm going to head down to the podium and do all three, one after another, and I will call up those who are accepting the proclamations this evening. Can I get Andrew Simmons? Hi. Simmons or Simons? Simons. Dang it. Dang it. Welcome. The first proclamation I'm doing this evening is Diaper Need Awareness Week, and I have Andrew Simons with me from Eastside Baby Corner. Whereas diaper need, the condition of not having a sufficient supply of clean diapers to ensure that infants and toddlers are clean, healthy, and dry, can adversely affect the health and welfare of infants, toddlers, and their families. And whereas the average infant or toddler requires an average of 50 diaper changes per week over 3 years, and whereas the people of Issaquah recognize that addressing diaper need can lead to economic opportunity for the state's low-income families and can lead to improved health for families and their communities. And whereas Issaquah is proud to be home to various community organizations that recognize the importance of diapers in helping provide economic stability for families and distribute diapers to low-income families through various channels. Now, therefore, I, Mary Lou Pauley, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do hereby proclaim the week of September 23rd to 29th, 2019 to be Diaper Needs Awareness Week. And I'd also like to ask if you'd like to share some words with us this evening.
All right, just a couple. Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Mayor Pauley. Council, Mayor Pauley, thank you on behalf of Eastside Baby Corner. I'm Andy Simons. I'm a member of the board and a resident of Issaquah for 40 years. And Eastside Baby Corner has an influence throughout the East Side, not just here, but it's an Issaquah organization and has many volunteers within our own community. We'll just cite one statistic, and Eastside Baby Corner last year donated 1 million diapers to different agencies, and that can make a tremendous difference. So we appreciate you recognizing diaper need with your proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. That's fantastic. The second proclamation this evening is the Mayor's Day of Concern for Hungry. And I'd like to invite Corey Walters, the Executive Director of the Issaquah Food Bank, to come up and join me. Good evening, Corey. Hi. I assume you will share some thoughtful words after the proclamation. Sure. Whereas our King County cities recognize adequate nutrition as a basic goal for each citizen, and whereas food banks, emergency and hot meal programs working with our cities, local churches, social service agencies, and hundreds of volunteers are striving day in and day out to stem the rising tide of hunger. However, still more help is needed. And whereas we believe that when citizens hear of the especially desperate needs of the hungry, as winter approaches and how their low incomes must stretch further to cover increasing fuel, electricity, and rental costs, leaving even less money for monthly food purchase, an outpouring of community assistance will follow. Now, therefore, I, Mary Lou Pauley, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do hereby proclaim September 21st, 2019 as the Mayor's Day of Concern for the Hungry. Thank you for coming, Corey.
Thank you.
All yours.
Thank you for having me. We're excited for our big food drive this Saturday. So if you're at any of the local QFCs or the Fred Meyers, think about contributing to the food bank. We also give out diapers and support EBC and helping distribute those diapers they give us. There are a lot of people in our community who have a lot of needs, so we really appreciate your support. The food bank is only one solution, one organization that's solving food insecurity in our community, and we recognize that it takes all of us in order to really make a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Fantastic. There we go. Oh, one more. So many pictures. Thank you. I'll see you Saturday. Okay, the third and final proclamation of the night is the Fishaquah Proclamation. And I have a very small crowd joining me tonight. Kathy McCrory, Alan Finkelstein, Carrie McGill, Pete Norby, Brenda DeVore, Sammy the Salmon, and do I have Salmon Day staff, some volunteers here as well? Or are you? Okay, come on up. Thank you. I love your shirt.
It's almost as good as me.
Around the salmon. There you go. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. Whereas salmon have long held a special place in the heart of our community, and whereas each fall the salmon return to our creeks and lakes, the first salmon arrived this year at the downtown hatchery on August 19th. And whereas their lure has driven schools of visitors to our town to learn more about our beloved salmon, and whereas the instinctive nature to return home to spawn has instilled a strong sense of community and family, and has earned us Family Circle's accolades for one of the best towns for families in America, and whereas Salmon Days has its own infamous mascot, Sammy the Salmon, who is rising to the official occasion by welcoming tens of thousands of visitors to celebrate our festival's 50th golden year. And whereas salmon are the primary reason why our internationally award-winning Salmon Days Festival is a Seafair sanctioned event and voted Best Washington Festival for 2018 by 425 Magazine and Travel Channel, now therefore I, Mary Lou Pauley, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do hereby declare, in honor of the Issaquah Salmon Day Festival, the first weekend of each year, our salmon-friendly city shall be known as Fishaquah. Fishaquah. And I am sure that I have somebody who would like to have say a few comments. Kathy.
So not only is it our 50th anniversary, but most festivals have a lifespan about 25 years. So we have doubled our life expectancy, which is amazing for our community. We couldn't have done it without the city's help. And we do have our own official sponsor sign for the city to thank you for all you've done for us. This festival has grown to be the largest two-day festival in the state. And we're very proud of that. But even more so, we're proud of the fact that Salmon Days now supports over 70 local nonprofits. And that's really what community is all about. That's what Salmon Days is all about. And we just want to thank everyone for making it possible and invite all of you to join us.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. And do you want to come around sort of over this way maybe so we can get a picture? All right. I'm going to help Sammy over.
I just love the flapping fins.
Is that M?
That'd be hilarious, but no. I could have been picking my nose. No, it's for a photo op.
You're not staying?
See my rock and roll? Oh, no, I know you're right there.
Thank you, Council. That's a few more proclamations than we typically do in one meeting, but fall is a very exciting time in Issaquah, that is for sure. The next item on our agenda this evening is audience comments. Audience, this is your time to address your members of council. The guidelines for public participation are displayed on the screen, and please limit your comments to up to 5 minutes. We have a sign-up list, and those who signed up will be called up first. And if you did not sign up, I'll make sure to ask if there are any additional speakers before we close this portion of the meeting. If you are here representing a group, can you please say that to let our council know? And if you are here listening to audience comments and you strongly agree with what you're hearing, please raise your hand so the council understands the level of support that is in the audience this evening. Tisha, has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
No.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address council this evening? Sure, come on up.
Hi, my name is Alexander Lau. I'm a Issaquah resident of probably about 15 years, and we are representing Issaquah DECA.
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I'm also representing Issaquah DECA here with Sander.
Okay, so something we wanted to discuss is that we are doing a project to become more environmentally friendly and limit the use of straws in this area. So, as addressing to the council, we would like to have your opinion on what legislator is there for, like, if there's any legislator for plastic straws, and also if there's any policies that we may be able to implement.
Thank you for coming to audience comments and sharing that. Typically, the council does not respond to questions in here, but I'm writing down what I think I heard you say was that you were looking to see if there's any legislative action that the council could take or any policies that they might want to consider.
Yeah.
And what we may be able to do this evening is to have them talk about that at good of the order, and we will make sure that we get a response to your question.
Okay.
Did you have any other information you wanted to share tonight?
Hi, so we're high schoolers at Issaquah High School, and we participated in this project because we believe that waste reduction and environmental friendliness in the future and in the present is a very relevant conversation. Although I know that legislation can't be made overnight, and although in 2012, Issaquah City Council has banned plastic bags for paper bags, such a legislation can't be repeated so frequently. And we understand that maybe our plastic straws to paper straws dream might not happen overnight today. But we want to look for more opportunities to incorporate waste reduction into the Issaquah resident conversation. And so looking at the proclamations I've seen today, we're looking to implement any event where we could bring that into the spotlight or make it an awareness week for Issaquah residents to discuss and, yeah, for the future.
That is great. And I hope you have your names right. I wanted to thank Jasmine and Alexander for coming in tonight. And we will prepare a response for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And there's some hands in the air waving in support. Is there anyone else who would like to, oh, many hands in the air waving for support. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council this evening? Connie?
So I'm Connie Marsh, and I live up on Squawk. And waste, boy. We have tried with waste, haven't we? But I do realize that it's getting, you go to the Starbucks and it's chaos. So it doesn't seem like anybody is really following up on our restaurant waste program that we did long ago and far, far away. I haven't heard a report on that in a long time. And it does seem like it might be time for an update of that. Remember Josh and all of that. So the other reason I'm up here is I got an email the other day that I thought was breathtaking from the city, which, you know, it's hard to take my breath away with emails from the city unless it's in fury. So, and that was that the request for the 10 feet of right-of-way for Newport Way is going to be reframed potentially to the value engineering study land form. And so I feel like the community was listened to. That neighborhood does not want a sidewalk along that side of the road, and framing it from the community perspective is awesome. and gives me hope that our community will now start joining in with our city, and we can all go in the same direction together instead of spending so much energy bopping at each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Hands in the air in the audience this evening. Anybody else wanting to address their council tonight? I'll ask for a second time. Any audience members wishing to address council? And a third and final time. Thank you, and thank you for the comments, both Connie and Alexander and Jasmine. That's super helpful. The next item on the agenda this evening is committee reports, and we will start with Councilmember Walsh.
No report at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No report this evening.
Thank you. Wow, what happened? Did August just happen or something? Councilmember Ray?
No report this evening.
Oh, wow. Councilmember Winterstein?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Growth Management Policy Board of the Puget Sound Regional Council met last Thursday, September 5th at PSRC headquarters in Seattle, and we conducted a public hearing on the draft Vision 2050 plan. There were quite a few comments. And also today, the 60-day comment period for the draft plan ended today, so 60 days is up. And so the board will be briefed on those comments at our next meeting on October 3rd. But during the rest of the meeting, we continued our discussion about three specific chapters within the plan. One was fiscal sustainability. There wasn't a lot of discussion about this, but it did come up, and even in my caucus meeting beforehand, that the primary concern that they were trying to address here is the disincentive around annexation. Annexation is a key goal of the Growth Management Act, and but they're expensive, and only King County cities ever had the sales tax rebate tool available to them. And so there's a big part of that fiscal sustainability or part of the cost of living up to the goal is the intent to ask Olympia to extend that tool to other counties. There's some conversation about that. The other chapter was climate, lots of conversation about climate. Most of the public hearing comments were about climate change and reducing greenhouse gas. And so there was a lot of interest and a number of members of the board, which I agree with, were very interested in that the plan actually names specific goals. It's more general, and it says it's referring to the goals of others. But I expect to see another revision that maybe has some more specific goals in that. Also, there were a number of interesting comments about how in the future, through other techniques, even more aggressive outcomes could be achieved. So I'm expecting to see some revisions as spurred by the board to come to that chapter still. And then finally, we were going to talk about the jobs, housing, balance section. We really didn't have time to discuss at length, and I expect that to come back in October. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Winterstein. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors met last Thursday on the 12th, and Councilmember Chris Ray and I attended. And notably, the board gave sort of head nods to the administration to begin looking at the government-created, nonprofit as a form of governance. Currently, the form of governance is by interlocal agreement. So the administration is looking at another potentially better way for the agency to be governed, but more information will be coming in the coming months, and there will be reports out on that, an opportunity for our council to participate and provide feedback and ask questions. Other notable item from the meeting is that the 20-year celebration for Eastside Fire and Rescue is on October 5th. And if my fellow council members have not signed up and would like to go, then there still is a very little bit of time. The deadline's today, but I'm sure if you called the office tomorrow, they might let you sign up. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Council President Martz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee met on Wednesday, September 10th. We had two potential action items. The first regarded Vision 2050 guiding principles. The net was the PIC recommended forwarding a document on general principles, but did not recommend moving forward as a body with a letter to GMPB.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I will mention that what sort of SCA recommended was that individual cities consider putting together their own letter. There wasn't a coherent sense of the body. So we said cities should do that on their own, not part of SCA. The city of Issaquah did put together a letter that's been forwarded to all of us based on the feedback that the administration heard during For Good of the Order when we previously discussed these topics, and did send that letter off to GMPB. The second item that we discussed was a proposed King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it right now because the consensus of the body was it was not ready to come out to individual municipalities. There are a raft of questions around the finances, the relationship of this proposed body to existing organizations that address homelessness, and probably most seriously, some very, 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 very serious questions around governance. And so I believe that this proposal is going to be revised before it would be in a form that we would want to discuss as a body. King County Growth Management Policy Council, GMPC, will be meeting on Wednesday, September 25th. The agenda has not been finalized, but there will be an action item related to the proposed Kirkland Downtown Center, and also update briefings on the annual annexation report and the Affordable Housing Committee from County Council Member Baldacci. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Council President Martz. There are a couple of items I need to report out on tonight in my mayor's report. Earlier this evening at 6:30 p.m., an executive session was held to discuss collective bargaining per RCW 42.30.140(4). There will be another executive session held later in this meeting to discuss collective bargaining per RCW 42.30.140(4), and that item will be expected to take 20 minutes, and action will not follow in open session. The next item on my report today, as you heard in public comments, I want to add some additional information and background on the Newport right-of-way acquisition on the Bldgs frontage, an update from post-council study session from last week. So on Tuesday, September 10th, Council received a presentation at a Council study session on a request to acquire frontage along the Bldgs property on Newport Way for construction of future roadway improvements. Council provided some comments and feedback at the work session, as well as the public, and our administrative team regrouped last week to review next steps. I wanted to take this opportunity tonight to provide an on-camera update. So here's a bit of background. The city was developing the Newport Way corridor concept at the same time as a local developer was working with the Bldgs property owners to explore options to develop the Bldgs property on Newport Way for residential use. The developer held a community open house for residents to discuss the proposal for housing and potential right-of-way improvements. The community input at that time was to ensure that there was adequate pedestrian options on both sides of Newport. There was also a request to consider whether or not the Mountains to Sound Greenway multipurpose trail on the north side may be better suited to the south side where the neighborhoods currently exist. The corridor concept plan included pedestrian features on both sides, but did leave the Mountains to Sound Greenway trail on the north side, and the council adopted this concept plan. The city then purchased Bldgs as an open space acquisition in 2018. Editorial, thank you. The city is now responsible for completing the frontage improvements instead of the developer. The city is currently advancing the design of this section of Newport Way. The city completed a value engineering study that indicated potential cost savings through removal of elements on the south side due to the expense of constructing fairly high retaining walls and removal of trees to accommodate the right-of-way features shown on the adopted concept plan, which included sidewalk and landscape elements on the south side. The community input on the design since the city purchase of the Bldgs property has placed the highest priority now on preservation of trees and the natural environment versus pedestrian mobility on the south side of Newport, adjacent to this Bldgs open space. At roadway design, open houses since the acquisition, the community has expressed a strong desire to minimize the impacts to the south side and to delete the sidewalk and landscaping, and to preserve the natural landscape to the maximum degree possible. The city is in the process of advancing the design of the roadway and is using the corridor plan as guidance. The council was asked for guidance last week on preferences and timing for right-of-way acquisition at last Tuesday's council study session. So after the session last week, there were follow-up discussions with the design team, and it indicated that the design process could proceed with the minimalist approach to improvements on the south side of Newport Way. This is different than what was stated at the council study session. We can proceed through our design to 90% without a sidewalk or landscape strip on the south side, but still allow for the accommodation of utilities. This design may not require a dedication on the south side of Newport across the Bergsma frontage. The administration can complete that assessment in the next 3 to 4 weeks to confirm that assumption and can be prepared to bring it back to council for action on November 4th. The two options could be no dedication, but a tight design fit within the existing right-of-way, or a small 2 to 3 foot dedication to allow for unforeseen circumstances, which could minimize the risk of unforeseen field conditions that may require some minimal dedication. This approach seems to align with the community comment and the general comments from council at last week's study session. So at the end of tonight's meeting, at good of the order, there'll be an opportunity for council to comment on any of this informational update. The last item that I had on my mayor's report tonight is I wanted to welcome a special guest in our audience. At the last regular council meeting, I had announced that Wally Bobkowitz would be starting as our city administrator on September 30th. He is here with us this evening in the audience. Nice to see you. And Wally, will you please stand so that those that are here will know? Thank you.
I stand up and so that I get him on.
Again?
Get him on camera.
Oh,
Oh,
I don't know how to do that.
slow reveal.
Good comment. So we're very excited that you're going to be starting at the end of the month. We are looking forward to working together. And that concludes the mayor's report. The next item on our agenda this evening is the consent calendar, and it was distributed to council in advance. If authorized, the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payroll and payables been reviewed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move we adopt the consent calendar as listed in tonight's meeting agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Our first item under regular business this evening is AB 7790, mitigation and impact fees for transportation, fire, police, bike and pedestrian, and general government buildings. This item was heard at the July 8th council work session and the August 13 council services and safety committee. And I'd like to ask Trish Heinonen, policy planning manager, to come up for a presentation. Hi, Trish.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. So the mayor already said one of my slides, so we're going to just go right through this. The framework for tonight is just a reminder that the proposed rates that you see in your packet are the highest that we're able to legally charge for impact fees and mitigation fees. That was our...
Trish, I'm going to get you to move a little closer to the
Oh,
mic.
sorry. That was our request to our consultant that we worked with, is that our policy was we wanted the highest that we were able to legally charge. The second policy that we worked under is to require the update of the rate studies every 3 years to make sure that we don't get behind on them as we have in the past. The third was to continue our annual adjustments that we do in January, February every year to make sure that we're keeping up with inflation. And the fourth is to include the new municipal facility in the general government buildings rate in that fee. So the purpose tonight is hopefully to have you authorize the update of all these fees. I have the chart here to show when we updated them previously. Some are a while ago. And the only one we're not doing tonight is the Parks Impact Fee, and we're scheduled to have that before you in November. The history is, we started in 2017 by hiring a consultant, FCS Group. We have 2 different contracts with them, one for transportation and parks, and the other for fire, police, and general government. We came to you at a July 8th work session to give you the initial information that we had found, get your questions, get some of the highlights. And then we went to August 13th Council Service and Safety Committee for their last meeting. The information, I believe there were 13 questions that were asked that night, and we have that information and the answers in your packet tonight. We'll start with fire. Fire is the oldest fee it's taken us to update, so it did go up higher than the rest. The reasons are we're using the new Station 71 and 72, the debt payments. We're putting those into the capital facilities plan and allowing the impact fees to pay for that debt. And the increases are for, as you can see, for single family, it's over 200%. The multifamily fee is almost 200%, and office building is 200%. And again, I think those were updated. The last time was 2006. So part of that is everything costs more. For traffic, there was a question in the July meeting of the concurrency. When you did this in 2015, we did the concurrency, the new concurrency back in the day, and the impact fee update at the same time. But you all are so efficient now, you did the transportation concurrency ahead of this, way ahead of this, and so you worked with Torsten, you were fine with concurrency, he gave all that information to us, and we did the traffic impact fees. So these are based on the new concurrency that you all did ahead of this. These didn't go up as much, but they did go up, and the most was the multifamily fee went down. A lot of folks ask us about that one, and it's because of the trip per person. ITE manual number went down a little bit because there's less people. According to the ITE manual, there's less people that live in a multifamily unit, so they cause less trips to come out. So that's the reason that the multifamily number went down. The bike ped mitigation fee, the reason that this one went up is this was a new fee, mitigation fee in 2015, and since we did this fee, there's been a new interest, shall I say, in bike ped facilities from the Central Issaquah plan, from the strategic park plan, and so there's a lot more projects that we're able to put into the fee calculations than there were in 2015. So that's one of the reasons that the fee has gone up. For police, these went up a bit, and the reason is the calls per service have gone up citywide, which isn't unusual because so many more people, so many more housing and commercial buildings. The calls for service have gone up, and those result in a bit of an increase in the rates. General government buildings, we still have the 2 proposals here, one with a new municipal campus and one without. As we've said before, the administration is proposing to recommend adoption of the one with the new municipal campus. Even with that in there, the fee goes down, and that's because we haven't done a lot of government buildings in the past. And a really interesting conversation came up at services about not always doing services through buildings anymore. We do them online a lot. We do financial kinds of things online. You pay your fees. You do all sorts of things. And so there was discussion that maybe next time we update the fees, we would put that new idea into the fee calculation and to see if there's a different way to calculate instead of the old brick and mortar way. So that was a really great discussion. Our consultants were just intrigued by that idea, and they keep saying, when do we get to do that? And it was like, hang on, we haven't adopted this site yet. So that was a really great discussion. We were asked to do a sample of what the total fees would be to an applicant coming in, and it's the new fee would be $3,000 more than it is today. And as you can see in the fine print, the average home price in Issaquah on Zillow now is just over $700,000. And the increase in the fee represents a 0.5% increase to the price of an average home. And from our discussions with folks in the know, it's not a really great increase that we believe would cause folks to not build here. It hasn't seemed to have put a damper on any of the builders that we've talked to.
Question.
Sure. Councilmember Winterstein?
Thank you. So that's the average price within Issaquah, but of course, impact fees on single-family homes, I am assuming that's what this would do. It has to do largely with the construction of new. It'd have to be a very significant.
Right.
Remodel, thank you. Do you have that price?
Of a new?
Because that's average of any all stock, any quality, any location, but we're talking, this affects new.
Correct. It would only impact fees, only new homes would have to pay an impact fee, correct.
So it doesn't apply to remodels.
that average, I'm sorry.
It doesn't apply to remodels.
Okay, but I just think, I mean, when we're presenting this information, that may be the average price, but it's probably not the average price of new homes, that's my point.
Right, and I think when we were trying to calculate it, we weren't quite sure how to calculate prices, because like you said, there's, depending on where someone's building, we thought this was a safer, consistent, but you're right, it would only be new and it would depend on where the homes are being built.
And that fee is fixed regardless of size or cost.
Correct.
So for new home construction, it would be a smaller percentage probably, but I mean, I just wanted to point that out.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions, or would you like just to continue?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And for
Trish?
multifamily, we also calculated that, and it's, this one represents 0.6% of the value of a project using Atlas as an example of a new multifamily project that looks like in the fine print on here, 110 million, the whole project. Are there any questions with multifamily? Okay. And then we did a non-residential just because folks had asked how high or not high those went up. And so we did office as a sample, and it only added $1.13 to the square footage for office across with all the fees as a sample. We did receive questions on Sunday afternoon. It's good you guys are all reading your packets. And I wanted to take a minute to go through those and see if anyone had questions. And the first question was, how frequent are impact fee adjustments per IMC 3.71.080? And that's when an applicant can come to the city and say, we don't believe your impact fees really reflect our business and the way our business runs. And the questioner asked, does this ever happen? And what would the rationale be? What would an applicant use the rationale to be if it didn't fit? And the one that I could think of, I haven't heard recently of many of them asking, but I wasn't able to ask Keith today. He's the one that gets the questions because he's the one that has to make the determination because he's the director. But back in the day, in the mid-1990s, we had a senior housing applicant come to us and say that they shouldn't have to pay park impact fees because the seniors that lived in their complex would not be using park facilities. And our answer was that our parks system has many different types of park facilities for old and young and of all abilities and all ages and all types. And so, yes, they really did need to pay park impact fees because everybody uses parks and should be able to use parks that are made to allow them to use the parks. And so that's the only time that I've heard someone ask us, but then again, I didn't get to ask Keith if there were any recent ones. But that's an example of why they believe that it's not structured for the folks that they're bringing to the city.
Trish, can I ask a question? I'm not familiar with the email and the length of questions, but they were submitted by council. And if council members had an opportunity to review the Q&A, do you want to have it done on camera as well, or did you have any follow-up questions? What's your preference? Councilmember Hunt.
So those are my question, or that one's my question anyway.
Not meant to signaling you out.
And
just
that's okay.
asking.
And there are a few other ones. So this one I do appreciate having a discussion about, because I did wonder about this adjustment. I saw that there's the adjustment for this fee and all the other fees, and then the adjustment language in our code seemed to be different for the traffic fee and then for example, the fire protection fee adjustment code section. And so I wondered about how often this adjustment is made and how it impacts the use of the code.
So that's great. Thank you. I want to just take the temperature of you and anyone else who submitted questions. And if you would think that it is best, most transparent, most understandable to have Trish go through the questions and answers on camera, she can. And so that's great. And if you think not, because you've got your answers, that's fine. We don't have to go through them. It's really your choice. I'd like to proceed. Councilmember Goodman?
Just one of 6 tonight.
Yeah.
I've read them all, and if I have questions, I can follow up on them. It's quite a lengthy list, so it could take us a while to go through every one of them on camera. But I'll do whatever everybody else wants to do.
I'm just looking for head nods or suggestions.
I'm fine. The one that I think it was mentioned about the municipal consolidation of City Hall. That was the other question about how flexible we could be if we have that in the plan and we say that we're putting impact fee for that when it's still a potential in the CIP. So that would be the other question that I am interested to discuss, and the others I'm fine with the written response.
Great. Trish, if you have some information on the question on consolidated municipal campus, that would be great. Thank you, Councilmember
and
Hunt.
was that 6? This number 6, Vicki? Okay.
5 and 6. But yeah, 5 is good.
Okay. The question was if the funds had to be used in 5 years and we weren't ready to use them in 5 years, could we extend our ability to use them? And the good news is the state actually extended it to 10 years. It originally was 6 years, and now it's 10 years. But if we don't use them in 10 years, then we have to return them back to the applicant. So we keep, as finance knows, we keep very good track of when they come into the city, and then the clock is ticking, and then they go out of the city, and we track when it comes in and when it goes out, so that we know that, hopefully we know that it is paid for some facility, capital facility, within the 10 years. And there's no wiggle room on that. If we haven't used it in the 10 years, then we have to return it. And as far as I know, that's only happened once that I remember, and that was back when it was 6 years, and we didn't use them in enough in time, and so we had to return them to the applicant. Is that enough, or was there?
Yep. We'll look for follow-up questions.
Okay.
Any follow-up questions? Any additional questions that were not submitted earlier that you would like to ask while Trish is up at the podium? Okay. Thank you, Trish.
Great. Well, then the next slide is the easy one, is the timing is September 16th, which is today, would hopefully be council action, and then they wouldn't go into effect until January 1, because the projects that are in the impact fees need to be in the capital facilities element of the comprehensive plan in order for us to legally assess those fees. And so we have to wait for the comp plan to be, and that element to be adopted before we can assess those fees. So we're hoping January 1 they'd be effective. And then I also put, just to get you excited, I put the Parks Impact Fee update schedule, as far as we know, knowing you guys are super busy, but that's the schedule perhaps for the Parks Impact Fee update. Questions on timing?
Great.
Great.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ray.
I'd move to adopt ordinance number
2877.
relating to impact and mitigation fees, adopting the 2019 impact fee and mitigation study, and amending Issaquah Municipal Code in order to update the city's transportation and fire impact fees and the city's general government buildings, pedestrian and bicycle, and law enforcement mitigation fees with an effective date of January 1st, 2020.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any council discussion? Councilmember Winterstein, followed by Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. There were some comments tonight which I think are very important. It's if there's been one question I've heard or claim or desire or wish, and sometimes it's delivered very emphatically, is that, boy, I really hope that growth is paying for growth. And that's easy to say, hard to do. And one of the tools that we have, we do use impact fees. This is about trying to understand how additional population, additional jobs, or whatever new number of people moving around, trips they generate, visits to parks that they generate, actually are contributing to the cost and the construction of these new public facilities to accommodate, the demand that they put on them. And so that's called growth paying for growth. It was said tonight, and I've shared this before, and we did this in our last update in 2015, that we have a policy of working within the framework of the law that allows us to set our impact fees at the highest, and Trish, you said this evening, about setting our impact fees at the highest allowed by law. Now, there's a calculation that goes into that. It's not trivial, but I think we take that very seriously. It's not a perfect tool. It doesn't, we have some deficits. So when we make changes and updates to things, we're kind of dealing with some deficits we already have, and this money can't go to fixing a deficit. It actually has to be what's new there. But I've been asked that, and earlier we had a number of representatives from the chamber, the chamber here, and I've go to their board meetings, and I've been asked that question there, and I just want to repeat publicly that as a policy, and with what's the proposal in front of us tonight that we're considering with this motion, is to adopt impact fees that are the highest allowable by law. And I think that does reflect the wishes of many of our residents and of my own as well. The second comment I wanted to make is I just want to respond to something that was said about some of these prices or impact fees going up, how it reflects that everything costs more. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that, because we do have a capital plan, including a transportation improvement plan, and it's the body of work that's in that plan that we're trying to price out, and those projects that have an impact due to growth. And so it's not just a static set of buildings or roads or parks and their costs have gone up. That set that we envision is the right level for our community changes over time. We add and we take away, and there are other factors as well. So it's not as simple as just the price of things. It does reflect plans in our capital plan and our improvement plans about what we think is essential and right for the city as it grows. And I think that's the important part. We're trying to identify what is needed to provide the level of service, whether it be with mobility or police or what have you. And we estimate that, we figure out what part of that is required or driven by growth, and we price that out. And I think that's just important for the general public to understand. It's not just about cost. It's about us trying to right-size the services and the facilities that this city requires. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
I also wanted to support this because it does put the impact fees at the maximum allowable level, and that's what we hear from the community, and I think that's the best thing for the community, to put those fees at the maximum allowable level. In the process of reviewing this, I did start looking more at the fee adjustments, and that's a separate issue, but I would want to potentially revisit that and to understand better why we allow for adjustments or in what circumstances we do, and to look across the different categories and make sure that we're applying the fees that we've stated.
Thank you. Any other comment? Councilmember Ray. And actually, Councilmember Ray, I have to apologize to you. As you know, I'm only 20 months into chairing meetings, and I still have a lot to learn. I just checked in with the city clerk. I believe when you make a motion this evening, any council member, I am supposed to ask the motion maker first if they would like to make comments, and I didn't do that. I'm
Well,
sorry.
there's time for you, though.
Heads up, there are some more action items tonight, so do not be surprised when you make a motion that I'm going to end up going to. So apologies, Councilmember Ray.
Apology accepted, not necessary by any means. There are two things in here that I think are really important. One is as we've heard previously, the setting the fees at the maximum allowable level. But I think the other thing, which is maybe equally as important, is the direction to do impact and mitigation fee reviews every 3 years, so that we don't find ourselves 10 or 12 years out. And what we see is with the fees that have the biggest jump are the ones that we haven't looked at in more than 10 years. So I think that is another part of this that's very important, and we're balancing the cost of doing these studies, which isn't necessarily trivial, with the benefit that we derive from it. The second thing that's not in this agenda bill or this resolution, Trish touched on briefly, which is around government buildings and the impact mitigation fee associated with that. And we had a very interesting discussion about broadening the scope of that to include general government investment in things other than, capital investments in things other than buildings. And that's something that I would like us to pursue in some more detail in the very near future. I think this is well overdone, and thank you for the work that you all did in putting this together.
Thank you, Councilmember Ray. Councilmember Goodman?
I just had a couple of comments, and I don't need answers, but based on the dates that I see in the agenda bill, it looks like maybe the last ordinance that we passed that required us to do updates every 3 years, maybe we're not even, looks like we're still outside those 3 years. Like to make sure that we address during budget. There's a mention in the agenda bill also that one of the reasons that we get behind is potentially budget impacts. So I want to make sure that during the budget that we are making sure that we can keep up with the schedules that we have adopted every 3 years. And then the second one is only slightly related to the agenda bill, and that is that I had an occasion to go to the city's website over the past few days and look at how these are, if you are wanting to build something or remodel something in the city, how you actually figure out what your impact fee is and whether you have to have a traffic impact analysis. It is very not user-friendly at all. So I know that's just remotely related to the agenda bill, but I wanted to take an opportunity to say that I would hope that when we are revising our website in the future and ways that we inform our applicants on what our fees are going to be, that we make it a much more friendly, usable. We should be able to go to the website and just figure it out, and maybe there's just an explanation sheet, but it's not user-friendly. But I am supporting that.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Trish, is that something that gets updated or looked at in the redo of Chapter 18?
It might. I know that we're talking about making the website more user-friendly and making it fewer clicks to find where the fees are and how to calculate them. I've heard the current planners talking about that. So, and I'll take it back and say that it was mentioned again to see what we can do on that.
And they are in Chapter 18, impact fees?
No, they're in 3, INC 3,
okay.
but there is right on our, the DSD page with applications, it has all the different applications, your fees and your affidavits and all that. And it is several clicks down before you get to the fees and how to calculate them.
Thank you for the
It'll
suggestion.
be different tracks for impact fees and TIA.
Right, and I wanted to know if it was going to be included in the updated code, but that is a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Council President Martz.
So I'm going to be supporting this measure this evening. I think to the extent that we have the ability, growth should pay for growth. But I think that we should acknowledge two things with this. One is that this is a very small amount of money compared to the fiscal challenges that we have as a community. And the second is that, once again, as Washingtonians, we are faced with regressive and unsustainable revenue sources. We have the Institute on Tax and Economic Policy last year said we had the most regressive taxes in the United States. The mechanisms that we have to pay for the things that we need put an undue burden on the least affluent among us, and this, by being a flat tax essentially on new housing, is yet more of the same. Someday, probably when I am dead and buried, our state will finally come around to having a progressive tax system, and our municipalities won't be faced with these awful choices on levying more and more aggressive taxes on people. We'll be more like my home state of Minnesota, which nobody considers a basket case, but is at the progressive end of the spectrum. And so it is unfortunate that tonight we are faced with the only mechanism that we have for growth to pay for growth is regressive, and it is unsustainable. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Martz. Is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 2877 relating to impact and mitigation fees, adopting 2019 impact fee and mitigation studies, and amending Issaquah Municipal Code in order to update the city's transportation and fire impact fees and the city's general government buildings, pedestrian and bicycle and law enforcement mitigation fees with an effective date of January 1st, 2020, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second item under regular business this evening is AB 7836, the 2019 budget amendment, and this is the first time this item is before council, and I'd like to ask Beth Goldberg, Finance Director, to make a presentation. Good evening, Beth.
Good evening.
You broke away from budget?
I did, to talk about budget.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Taking a break from the budget to talk about the budget, because that's what we do in finance. My name is Beth Goldberg. I'm the Director of Finance, and I am here to talk tonight about the 2019 budget amendment. This is the first time before the council, and we are seeking, if council is comfortable, approval tonight, because most of the items in this budget amendment are things that the council has already seen. So this is very much of a technical item, a housekeeping item to align the 2019 budget with previous action that the council has taken. And so I'm going to provide you tonight with an overview of the items that are in the budget amendment, and then, as I mentioned, we'll be seeking council approval of the ordinance. I should also mention at the outset that there is hopefully, we're actually hoping to bring forth another budget amendment later this year that would reflect some grant monies that we're hopefully going to receive from King County that will help offset some of the Bldgs costs that we have previously talked to you about. So there likely will be one other budget amendment that will be coming forth to the council later this year. The first item I want to talk about with regard to the amendment that is before you tonight is actually a somewhat new item in this budget amendment, and it's new in that the council has not talked about it this year, but council has talked about it in previous years, and this is going back to November of 2016. The council authorized an interfund loan between from the Fleet Services Fund to the Street Capital Fund to address what was seen at the time as cash flow needs related to two projects in particular, Southeast 62nd and some work on East Lake Sammamish Parkway. At the time that this was presented to the council, there was an anticipation of some grants that were coming in, and so this was to address some cash flow needs to keep the projects moving while we were waiting for the grants. The initial payback period contemplated at the time was that it would be paid back in the following year, that the grants would be received, we would pay back the loan in the following year. The following year came, and the grants did not materialize, so the loan was extended until December of 2019. So finance staff have worked with worked with Public Works Engineering to understand what was going on with this grant, because as best as we could tell, the grants didn't materialize. So the grants that were cited in the ordinance were actually grants that were received earlier than 2016, so we've never, it's not clear what grants the ordinance was based on. And so as we're looking at this loan coming due, we're faced with a couple of options. We could extend the loan again, or because we do not believe that these grants are going to materialize, look for a mechanism to pay off these loans. So that is what we're recommending here. And we are recommending using fund balance in the mitigation fund related to the traffic impact fees. There's a balance in excess of $6 million in that fund for traffic impact fees to repay this loan. And we believe that this is an eligible expense because if you look back at the impact study that was done back in 2015, Southeast 62nd and East Lake Sammamish Parkway were named projects for those mitigation dollars. So that is why we are recommending using those funds to pay off this loan. It is, as I mentioned, $3 million, plus we owe interest of $142,000. So to effectuate this payback of this loan, it would require a transfer or an expenditure from the mitigation fund, transfer it as revenue to the street capital fund, and then another transfer to the fleet services fund to pay off the loan. And then with this action, the loan will be paid off, fleet services will be made whole, and there will be over $3 million left in the traffic mitigation fund for other impact projects eligible for the impact fees.
I see some questions. No? Move on? Okay, we're good. Keep going. Thanks, Beth.
Okay, so the other new adjustment, and this is very much of a technical change that is included in the budget amendment that has not come before council before, is related to work on the environmental impact statement for Lake Sammamish State Park. The budget had contemplated this work would be done by DSD, but instead Public Works Engineering is going to complete this work. So we're recommending the transfer of the expenditure authority that had been in the general fund and transfer that to street operating to allow Public Works Engineering to complete this work. Again, this is not a new project. This is just shifting budget authority from one fund to another fund. And then we have a list of items that we are requesting appropriation authority for items that council has previously talked about through other legislative action and authorized the administration to include these items in a later budget amendment. And so very quickly, these items are $156,370 for the Front Street Streetscape project. This was approved by council in February 2019. It is an increase in general fund expenditures transferred to the street capital fund to pay for this work. In addition, there's a project, the Lower Reed Infiltration Gallery, out of the Stormwater Fund. This would increase expenditure authority by $530,000, just over $530,000. This project was originally approved by council in April 2019. In the sewer fund, got those numbers backwards. $315,000 is sought for the Holiday Inn lift stations. This was outlined in action that council took in April of 2019. And then increase in general fund revenues from a grant, and then the corresponding expenditures related to the King County 1 million grant tree planting program, and this was taken up by council in June of 2019. And then last, the Gilman Ditch Restoration Project that was just before the council a couple of weeks ago. This would increase the appropriation authority in the Stormwater Fund by $230,000. So this slide here shows the overall impact of all of these changes on fund balances. So there's a modest impact to the general fund balance of $370. And then if you look through the rest of them, street operating, a decrease in fund balance of $156,000. The mitigation fund, as I mentioned, related to the traffic impact fees, this balance is over $6 million, so this reduction would leave $3 million available. Street capital is increasing, which is offset by the increase up above related to the general fund and street operating. And then sewer and stormwater are decreasing, and fleet is increasing as the loan has been paid off. So that concludes my overview of the budget amendment.
Thank you. Questions from council? Are we ready for a motion? Question or motion?
Motion. Madam Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance number
2878.
amending the 2019 budget as set forth in ordinance number 2854 and amended in ordinance number 2863 concerning revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for various funds for the year 2019, repaying the interfund loan set forth in ordinance number 2786 and extended by ordinance number 2834, and authorizing the finance director to make the necessary adjustments and approving prior expenditures.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any council discussion? Because if there is, I'm going to have to read this whole thing again. Council President Martz just read. Okay, seeing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That carries unanimously. Third item under regular business this evening is AB 7845, Retention Incentive Personnel Policy, and I'd like to ask Andrea Snyder, our interim city administrator, to come forward for the presentation. Good evening.
Good evening. What is not widely known is that in addition to serving as interim city administrator, sometimes I also moonlight as the acting HR director.
That's true.
So I wanted to give a quick presentation about the retention policy that is available in the agenda packet this evening. The retention incentive policy would allow the city flexibility to offer short-term financial incentives to retain key mission-critical employees to maintain adequate levels of service to the public. And the city recently performed a classification and compensation study to determine if its employee compensation was in line with market compensation levels. Also, as part of the classification compensation study, the city is examining personnel policies that would expand and modernize our tools to attract and retain qualified employees. Retention incentives are a part of those personnel policies that we anticipate bringing forward to council. This is the first part that's coming out to you rather quickly because we've established that there may be a need within city operations to exercise this tool if council approves. Retention incentives are common in the private sector, education settings, and large public sector agencies. So they have been shown to be effective on a short-term basis, while other long-term changes to compensation, job duties, work environment, et cetera, are being explored. Retention incentives are utilized for positions that are, again, mission critical or difficult to fill. So the city has drafted a retention policy that's included in your packet. As part of this policy, the policy provides authority for the mayor and the city administrator to administer a retention incentive agreement with key mission-critical employees as defined in Section A of the policy attached in your packet. It also establishes eligibility requirements for employees to receive the incentive payment. It also requires verification that the city is at imminent risk of losing its employee. It establishes a maximum rate of incentive and the length of time the incentive can be utilized. Again, the intention is that the incentive is a short-term bridge to a longer-term solution to retain employees or recruit critical employees. And It also establishes payment methods and requirements for executing the agreement between the city employee, including repayment of the incentive if the employee leaves before the agreement expiration. Those are the general components. The city foresees using this policy on a very rare basis. That's why we have tailored the criteria for eligibility to be pretty narrow as compared with other retention policies that are out there in the market. But we do seek tools that will allow us flexibility in times of need to respond to urgent situations. So next steps would be if the city were to adopt this retention policy, there is an item that follows this on the agenda today discussing an MOU with one of our bargaining units to be able to utilize this incentive if adopted. And also, in regards to the classification compensation study, council will be hearing a presentation from our consultant with an update on that study on September 24th. And so we can discuss where the city is in compensation in relation to the market, as well as preview what are some of the other changes we may anticipate to personnel policies. At this time, the administration is asking council to adopt a retention incentive policy that would be applicable to all city employees. An alternative is that the council may choose, for example, to narrow the policy further to a specific group with an amendment to the resolution. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Ray.
I just have a couple really easy ones for you.
Great.
So where's the funding come from to cover the cost of the retention incentives?
We anticipate that the costs would come from the department budget. So in the cases that we could foresee in the near future, that would be the case, that they would be absorbed in the department budget. And the reason for that is that if we are at a point where we may be losing employees, such that it threatens a critical service that the city provides, that we anticipate having salary savings in that case that would then be used to cover the costs of a retention incentive.
Now, the second one's a little harder. We have two levels of incentive, a 2.5% and a 5%. What's the criteria to determining whether we would do a 2.5 or a 5% retention bonus?
Great. The criteria are, so Section A of the draft policy lists a number of criteria. In order to be able to use 5%, so the amount, so let me back up a little bit here. On Section A, we have 4 criteria that may be applied for an employee to use this incentive. That would be up to 22.5% of the annual base salary in exchange for an agreement to stay with the city for 6 months. Now, that amount may be doubled to 5%, as you note, if at least 3 of those criteria in Section A are met. So up to 5% of the annual base salary can be used in exchange for an agreement to stay with the city for 6 months. So that means that the employee would have to meet not just one of the criteria in Section A, but 3.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Council President Martz, would you like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion, and if that motion is seconded, I'm going to follow it immediately with an amendment. I move to adopt resolution number
2019-12.
amending the city's personnel policies to include a retention incentive policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Couple of seconds there. Council President Martz.
I move to amend resolution number 2019-12 with the 4 following changes. Change number 1, add to the end of the title, or employees represented by the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. Change number 2, in the first recital, substitute in critical roles with represented by the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. Change number 3, add to the end of section 1, for employees represented by the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. And finally, change number 4, delete section 3.
Is there a second for the amendment?
Second.
Thank you. Council President Martz, would you like to talk to your proposed amendment?
I think that we would like to move forward with this, understanding that personnel challenges in the city, but I think that we would like to take the time when we look more broadly beyond the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. We would like to take a little bit more time to understand the implications for a citywide policy, thus wanting to keep this narrow focus this evening.
Any other comments? Councilmember Winterstein.
Yes. This amendment to the motion, which amends the resolution, achieves another goal that I had coming here tonight, which would have been proposed changes to the actual policy itself. We've heard a couple times this evening description of the work as being urgent or critical. And since I know that would have been the intent of the application of the policy, I thought it would have been appropriate to add those adjectives to the actual policy itself. But in these amendments of placing it specifically within this one group, IPSSA, I think by very definition of the work they do, I believe it's public safety related, and that work is generally very essential and critical and urgent. So I'm satisfied with this amendment proposal to adjust the concern I had earlier.
Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Are you, Councilmember Wright?
I think this is on the amendment, but it's a little bit broader in scope, and that is we operate in a very competitive labor market, and I think we all know that. And there is a significant cost of turnover in any organization when people leave. And so there is good reason to have a tool such as a retention incentive to keep people who are in very high visibility, highly critical positions employed. That being said, and why I think the amendment is absolutely essential, is that it's a very, very important decision we're making to put something like this in place. And given the time frame in which we need to act for some immediate needs, I would like to move forward with the resolution as amended. And I would love to come back and spend some more time and hammer out this policy so that we can make sure that we have something that is effective and is equitable.
Thank you, Councilmember Ray. Any other comments before we go to vote on the amendment only? No other comments? I'll reread the amendment. The motion is to amend resolution number 2019-12 as follows. Change number 1, add to the end of the title for employees represented by the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. Change number 2, in the first recital, substitute in critical represented by the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. Change number 3 is to add to the end of section 1 for employees represented by the Issaquah Police Support Services Association. And change number 4 is to delete section 3. All in favor of the amendment to the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? It carries unanimously. Council President Martz, would you like to speak to the main motion?
I would. So when we talk about services that go to the heart of our community, I am always drawn back to the active shooter incident that we had in the city approximately, time flies, 6 or 7 years ago. And what it means to have dispatchers who are local and know our community. And this is a subject that I fought very hard for when there was a conversation about a PSAP consolidation effort in King County. I fought about as hard as anything I fought to try to keep our ability to have a PSAP, which is a which is a dispatch, basically, for those who don't know. But on the day that we had the active shooter incident, it's my understanding that within 60 seconds of the call coming in, we had done a number of things. We had done things like calling over to the gun range to get the gun range to shut down, and there's video out there that shows them getting the call and shutting down the gun range so that responding officers would understand what was going on where. And we had, I believe, it was 10 or 11 other law enforcement agencies that were already on their way. Pretty impressive. So understanding the need to have strong continuity and strongly capable people in these positions, I think, is an absolute cornerstone of what we do in our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Martz. Anyone else wishing to comment on the main motion? Thank you. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving resolution number 2019-12, amending the city's personnel policies to include a retention incentive policy, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Fourth item under our regular business this evening is AB 7858, Issaquah Police Support Staff Association Memorandum of Understanding, and I'd like to ask Lauren Knox, our HR coordinator, to make a presentation. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, and this is closely related to obviously what Andrea just spoke about. So with this agenda bill, we're asking for council to ratify a memorandum of understanding with our Issaquah Police Support Services Association. That MOU essentially allows us to offer the retention incentive policy to IPSSA so that their members, which are our dispatch, corrections, and police records staff, may be able to participate in the policy. The MOU was a result of conversations between the city and IPSSA, recognizing a need to respond quickly to some staffing challenges, particularly in our dispatch group. These are typically extremely hard to fill positions in the region, and as Councilmember Martz mentioned earlier, a need for strong continuity and experience amongst that staff group. The MOU, the city opened conversations with IPSSA about participating in the policy and negotiated with the unit. The MOU represents the completion of discussions between the parties and an agreement between the parties with the recognition that council would need to act in order to implement the agreement. The understanding in the MOU is that this policy will apply to our dispatch staff, and that is the intention. We need flexibility to be able to have tools to react to situations with these critical staffing positions as they arise. If council approves the policy, again, we'll seek to apply it to our dispatch staff within the language of the policy and subject to its terms. So again, very limited application. We anticipate that the cost impact for 2019 will be approximately $20,000. As Andrea mentioned earlier, that will be absorbed in the department budget, so there's no need for additional budget for this item. So again, to reiterate, we are asking for council to ratify the MOU representing an agreement between the city and IPSSA to apply the retention incentive policy to the IPSSA bargaining unit.
Thank you, Lauren. Questions? Is anyone prepared to make a motion? Council President Martz?
I move to ratify the Memorandum of Understanding with the Issaquah Police Support Staff Association, IPSSA, as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any council discussion? Council President.
That's okay.
Council Member Winterstein.
That's okay, thank you. I'm glad to see and know that management and the administration, when recognizing a need are able to respond so effectively in such a short period of time. I do appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No further discussion. All those in favor of ratifying the Memorandum of Understanding with the Issaquah Police Support Staff Association as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda this evening is good of the order. I have 2 items noted down, but I want to see if anybody has anything to add. Anything for good of the order? Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you, Mayor. Start with a question for you. I had the opportunity to meet with you and Deputy Administrator Snyder last week. We had kind of a briefing on budget.
Yes.
Were you able to meet with every member of the council? I wasn't the last one.
Good question for Interim City Administrator Snyder.
Since last
I believe
Wednesday.
the answer is yes.
Oh, she heard my question.
I apologize. Can you repeat the question?
Have you met with every one of the council and giving a preview of your anticipated major items of the 2020 budget? Like you and I,
Yes.
Mayor, met last Wednesday.
Yes, we have. Yes.
Okay, so everybody has kind of heard that news, and I just wanted to take this opportunity, very interesting this evening, to hear Council President Martz talk about regressive nature of impact fees, flat fee regardless of the price and all of that. And we know because, and she's no longer here, in this room a couple weeks ago, our finance director gave a presentation about the forecasted deficit because of forecasted revenues being down, expenses being up for 2018, carrying that over, 2019, some of that carrying over into 2020. And we were looking at that time, I think the number was presented was pretty significant, like around $5.2 million. I heard in the briefing that there was a consideration of new revenue and related to utility taxes, and I've been thinking quite a bit about that. That only applies to property owners.
Councilmember Winterstein, let me take a break for a second. Because there has been no proposal made yet, I
understood.
just want to check back with the interim city administrator and see if she's comfortable with this
I'm just
conversation.
letting people know that I believe that's very regressive, and it's not something I'm going to support. That's all. There's my public comment. Thank you.
Anything else for good of the order? So I have a couple things here. You did hear during public comments tonight that we had some DECA students here who had some questions for you, wanting to kind of probe around the edges and see how their council feels about environmental issues, recycling, and I think in particular, banning of plastic straws. And I just wanted to get some direction from you. I have a suggestion that maybe the administration goes back to the Office of Sustainability and gets some more information and gets in contact with DECA to see what resources we can provide. And maybe there is an opportunity or some will on your part to consider other options along that line. Does that seem appropriate to start with OS? Council President Martz, and then Councilmember Hunt, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should always be looking at ways to reduce the waste stream.
Yeah.
I personally have not yet been convinced that changing straws will have a substantial impact. I mean, I think when we look at food packaging and we look at general plastic bags, I understand that impact. So as we look at this, I would want to understand how this might compare to other mechanisms that we could use or that other municipalities like ours have used to reduce the waste stream, and if it's the most bang for the buck, so to speak.
Thanks. Councilmember Hunt.
I'm often impressed by the enthusiasm that our community has for preserving our natural environment and for doing things like reducing our waste stream. So I think this could be part of a discussion about how we could do that and how we could look at what options we could take as a city to make a meaningful impact and reduce the waste that we're producing.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Goodman.
I don't disagree with the comments that first of all, I'm impressed with the interest in our local students to come to a city council meeting and express their concerns and their interests in their environment and the future and whatever else they want to comment to us about. And certainly as we would with all other commenters, we would go back and analyze and evaluate what their suggestions are, and that could be part of a conversation, of course, keeping in mind that we are facing a difficult budget coming up.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Earlier today, we did hear in audience comments about follow-up conversations from your study session last week on Newport Way. I presented some additional information tonight, which was shared with you all last week, near the end of the week. And I just wanted to provide you an opportunity, if you so desire, to provide comments on that, or just to wait till the next touch, which is, I think we said November 4th. Councilmember Wintersheim.
Very much appreciate your taking action in response not only to the public comments, but to, I think, a general sentiment that was very clear from the council during that study session. I wouldn't say it made me speechless, but we heard some phrases tonight that a comment this evening about how that was received, and my reaction was similar.
Oh,
I was very pleased. I think that's tough, and because there is a formal adoption that we've done, and I do in follow-up, and I think you said you're going to address this, that we have formally adopted that concept plan, and I would like to know if from kind of keeping things buttoned up and tight, that if any type of amendment to that or any other legislative action may be required, even just to make sure what we adopted and then the design that your staff goes forward with are in sync.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on that? Councilmember Ray.
So I'm super excited about the change in direction. I think it's what the community wants. But there's, I guess, a larger question that I'd like us to ponder as we go forward, which is our environment is not static and things change. And we set plans and we set directions, and then the world changes around us. And what I think is really good about what we did around Newport, it was us, the administration, pivoting with that new information and saying, you know, it made sense in 2017. The world changed, the situation changed, and we recognized the change, the community recognized the change, and we were able to pivot. So this is an instance, and we did the right thing, and I'm really excited about that. But I think as we look forward, it's always questioning that, are we doing the right thing? Are we factoring in new information? Are we getting tied into something because it's what we said we were going to do, and it no longer is the right thing to do? So it's always doing the right thing, even if it means we have to backtrack sometimes.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Goodman.
I just thank you for, to everybody who was involved in listening to the community and primarily the community, because I think the council had questions, but also heard the questions of the community, which influenced our study session. So not only just thank you for listening, but thank you for being prompt about telling the community about the pivot change.
Great. Any other comments? Good work last week. The last thing I wanted to do is give a few meeting updates. So September 24th, there'll be a council special meeting at 6 p.m. and the potential agenda items are the presentation of the proposed 2020 budget. September 24th is also a council study session starting at 6:30 p.m. and the potential agenda items are the classification and compensation study, the Southeast 43rd Signal Improvement funding options, and on October 7th at the regular city council meeting, which will be starting at 6 p.m., which is a time change for us, there are currently no regular business items currently scheduled. October 7th is also a budget study session starting at 7:15 p.m., so you're doing double duty. And it will be the first proposed 2020 budget deliberations opportunity for council. And that is all I had on meeting updates. As we announced earlier, we will be going into an executive session this evening. to discuss collective bargaining per RCW 42.30.140(4), and this item is expected to last 20 minutes, and there is no action anticipated to follow an open session. So we will now recess into executive session at 8:42. We are back in open session at 9:04 PM, and there being no further business this evening, we're adjourned at 9:04 PM.
So